My first experience with DMT was extremely intense, extremely bad, and absolutely the most excruciating horror of my life, and that doesn't even begin to describe it. I am very spiritually enlightened, in touch with my chakras, and have vast medical awareness of my body, and of my spiritual body third eye, which may have affected my experience. I was out of town with my husband, visiting friends, and I was having a great weekend. I had known on this trip that I'd be doing DMT, but didn't do much research on it. I watched 2 YouTube videos of morons talking about mechanical elves. Little did they mention leaving all forms of reality. I was totally unprepared for what occurred. I was skeptical that it would even do anything because I have done so much with LSD and mushrooms and yet to have an intense visual experience. I do smoke pot often and have for over a decade, but I'm not a wake and bake type of smoker. The night before we did the DMT, my husband, his friends, and I partied hard, so this could be taken into consideration. We had smoked 7 bowls of ultra premium grade, 2 B hits, and 2 shots of Patron tequila, and a THC chocolate chip cookie. Oh, and I was also drinking mead. That night, I hardly slept and was constantly waking to what I thought were demonic spirits in my room, but I also knew I had never been that alone in my life, so I threw it up to being high. I normally see spirits, so this wasn't unusual, only that they felt menacing and what they didn't want me in their house. The next day was the day we were all planning on doing DMT for the very first time. I woke up the day of, I still felt high, even though we weren't smoking anything that day of because we wanted to try DMT clean. However, I still felt high until the point we smoked the DMT. I had 2 experiences with DMT. Since this was all of our first time doing DMT, we decided to do a trial run. Since we were going to be smoking it, a glass pipe was needed, but flame could not directly hit the DMT. So my husband and his best friend rigged an aqua globe and drilled a hole in the top of the globe. With a funnel, they poured the DMT into the glass aqua globe. We dipped the glass mouthpiece in silicone to prevent cuts. The DMT was divided out into carefully measured parts. We started with 30 milligrams of DMT. We smoked it in a glass pipe we brought for this. All 3 of them smoked it and said it tasted terrible, like burnt plastic. But it felt good and clean, that things felt amplified, so I thought, okay, here it goes. I smoked my first hit of DMT, which as we had studied wouldn't take us away from our bodies. The physical buzz of smoking this drug is extremely similar to a full body buzz of doing nitrous. Then to my amazement, I saw for the first time in my life, visuals. My husband's face began morphing into a silly putty face, and every movement, every sound wave created the most beautiful visuals, lines, fractals, waves, everywhere. Rainbow so beautiful, I was so taken back by the intensity of the beautiful visuals I was witnessing here in the living room of our friend's house. It was so intense, just this one trip. While I was going through it, I thought to myself, I am not doing the full amount. Within 3 minutes, I was not seeing visuals and nearly sober but experiencing the body buzz. Within 30 minutes, I had decided to go through with the full-blown amount. We took an hour between hits so that we could come down mildly between the hits. Maybe this accounted for the fact that I had the type of trip that I had. My second hit of DMT was 60 milligrams. I was the 4th in the group of friends that took the 60 milligram hit. When I watched the other 3 take it, it was apparent that they each left their bodies and that they were at peace. After they came back, they stated that it was the most intense experience of their life, that they saw visuals, but it was a very happy, peaceful experience. I was leery, but decided to buck up and do it. Puff, puff, puff. Everyone kept on saying, don't fight it, let go, but what they were really saying is, let go of your reality and body. I was terrified. I take the final hit that sent me to hyperspace. I felt the feeling that I get over the top hill in the roller coaster, that gut feeling of, OMG, I can't handle this G-force. Except that feeling didn't go away like it does on a roller coaster. I realized that I was completely detached from my body. I wasn't in a room, on a couch, in a house, on Earth. I didn't recognize anything around me from this universe. I saw fractals, geometric patterns, psychedelic imagery all around me. Space and time didn't exist, and I realized that this was the space, in between the spaces, the code behind the matrix. The stuff that everything is made of, and that is when the chaos sent me into hysterics. Suddenly I began feeling deep-rooted emotional terror and feelings of low self-esteem and rejection from my childhood. I felt as though time did not exist and I had no idea how to get back to my body. I tried physically to come back and I did once or twice, but I got sucked back to DMT land. I remember not having a sensation of having a body, but the experience of having conscious thought. I remember seeing the horror of the familiarness of not being in reality, seeing fractals and chaos, and the feelings of utter degradation of self, the power of feeling worthless in the eyes of everything. I can understand how people can experience this and say they saw God. At one point during the trip, I began recognizing images, or began putting together images into 3D objects I could recognize, like finding shapes in clouds. I began witnessing scenes that were familiar, like the scene from Dumbo with the pink elephants on the parade, and seeing trippy psychedelic posters from the 60s. It was as though the images were mocking me, laughing at my horror. I felt like I was in a Pink Floyd album. As I came back, I remember being utterly terrified from the experience. As I felt my body, I got up from the couch and ran outdoors trying to get away from the living room, the place where I experienced the worst livid horror of my life. My trip was very bad because of all the trauma I relived during my DMT trip. I wish I would recall interesting images to recall to you, but I can't remember the images, but I remember the feelings. I felt so much anguish and horror and terror and bad things. I think maybe DMT brings the worst emotions out of some people. I've had a very hard life, and I've had to push a lot of bad emotions down to deal with the real world. Maybe DMT brings out what I refuse to acknowledge. DMT pops me out of third dimension reality. I'm not even experiencing what I would experience in an out-of-body experience or when I die. I would know. I have had an outer-body experience before. This was another realm completely. It's an inner knowing that we all feel after experiencing it, that it is somehow the way things really are behind the curtain. To this day, I have no idea why I had a bad trip. I was nervous about it, and the experience was the most intense experience of my life, but still, so were the other people. There are parts of my trip that I know I experienced, but I am not able to remember. I can only remember the trippy fractals, even though I know I experienced reliving childhood trauma to some extent. And the worst part of it is time does not exist, so it goes on forever, and ever, and ever. Regardless of this experience, I am determined to do it again. I think now that I know what to experience, I will not freak out. But it could happen, and I am open to that too. No one could have prepared me to feel what not feeling reality feels like. But after doing DMT, LSD is like child's candy. At least on LSD and shrooms, I realize that I'm still in a room, on planet Earth, that have fingers even though they appear 3 feet long and glowing. DMT takes me to a place that is the center of all creation. The chaos that was there before God created matter. DMT shows me a place that only the gods know about. I feel blessed to have had this experience, though it was an extremely bad trip. I am determined to try it again. It has forever changed me. It is a life-changing event. Know the good, the bad, and the ugly of DMT before you do it.